sorry, sir, but I think you and your family are in the wrong place." The words hung in the air, colder and sharper than the chilled champagne flutes on the surrounding tables. The man who spoke them was young, with a haircut that cost more than the shoes on the man he was speaking to. His name was Julian, and his posture was a performance of practiced disdain. The man he was addressing, Samuel Washington, age 68, a grandfather, did not flinch. He simply stood there in the opulent foyer of l'Étoile Filante, the city's most brutally exclusive restaurant. His wife, daughter, and grandson stood with him, a small island of quiet dignity in a sea of gawking patrons. The warmth of the city night they had just left was a distant memory, replaced by the hostile, air-conditioned judgment of the room. Someone's phone was out, the small red light of a recording blinking with predatory glee. Julian gestured vaguely toward the gilded door, a silent, dismissive flick of his wrist, a command, "Leave." Samuel's daughter, Maya, took a sharp breath, her knuckles white where she gripped her purse. Her son, 15-year-old Leo, just stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched, trying to shrink himself out of existence. Samuel placed a gentle hand on his daughter's arm, a silent plea for calm. He met the waiter's gaze. His eyes were not angry, they were not hurt, they were ancient, they were patient. They held the unnerving stillness of a deep, dark lake. But the small black card Samuel was about to place on the pristine white tablecloth wouldn't just get them a table. It would burn the entire restaurant to the ground. 5 years before that humiliating night, Samuel Washington was a ghost. Not in the spectral sense, but in the professional one. To his neighbors in the quiet, tree-lined suburb where he owned a modest brick house, he was just Mr. Washington, a retired widower, a man who spent his mornings tending a small, meticulous garden of herbs, rosemary, thyme, French tarragon, and his afternoons reading in the sunroom. He was pleasant but distant, a man defined by routine and a profound, unshakable quiet. His routine was a liturgy. Wake at 4 a.m., no alarm needed. Black coffee, brewed in a simple drip machine. He would sit at his small kitchen table and read. Not newspapers, but financial reports from the hospitality industry, quarterly earnings for global hotel chains, supply chain analyses for organic produce distributors. He read them with the focus of a Talmudic scholar studying scripture. By 5:30 a.m., he would be making his breakfast. Always the same. A 3-egg omelet, no salt until the very end, folded with a technique so perfect it looked like a solid piece of gold. He ate it slowly, thoughtfully. It was an act of discipline. Just breathing, just canvas, just discipline. This quiet man, this neighborhood fixture of gentle obscurity, was a secret legend in a world of screaming egos and celebrity chefs. In the highest echelons of the culinary and hospitality world, he was known only by a pseudonym, the Ghost of Augustus. The name was a nod to Auguste Escoffier, the king of chefs. And like a ghost, Samuel was invisible. He was a fixer. When a Michelin-starred restaurant was hemorrhaging money, when a luxury hotel chain was on the brink of collapse, a quiet call was made. Samuel would arrive, not in a suit and tie, but in the uniform of a janitor, a dishwasher, a low-level prep cook. He would spend weeks, sometimes months, inside an organization, observing. He watched everything, the way the inventory was counted, the time it took for a ticket to get from the server's hand to the kitchen line, the body language of the sous chef when the head chef turned his back. He saw the rot that spreadsheets could never reveal. He saw the waste, the inefficiency, the broken morale. Then he would deliver his report. A simple, devastatingly precise document that laid bare every flaw. He didn't offer complex solutions. He offered simple, brutal truths. Fire this manager. change the supplier, shorten the menu by half. His fee was never a fixed amount. It was a small percentage of the money the business saved in the first year after his intervention. It was always a fortune. Then he would disappear, leaving behind only the whisper of his legend. He had saved over 47 businesses from bankruptcy. His net worth was a quiet secret, tucked away in diversified, low-risk investments, managed by a firm that knew him only as a client number. This life of quiet power was born from a deep and searing loss. His wife, Eleanor. They had met when he was just a 19-year-old line cook, and she was a waitress with a smile that could melt glaciers. They shared a dream, a single, unifying purpose, to one day open their own place. Not a grand, ostentatious temple of gastronomy, but a small, perfect restaurant. A place with maybe 12 tables, fresh flowers, and food that felt like a hug. They would call it Eleanor's. For 35 years, they worked and saved. Every spare dollar went into a savings account labeled with their dream. He climbed the ladder, from line cook to sous chef, always hitting a ceiling made of glass and prejudice. He was brilliant, but he was a black man in a world that only wanted faces like his in the back, washing dishes. He never complained. He just learned. He mastered every station, every cuisine, every technique. He learned butchery, pastry, sauces, management. While others chased fame, he chased mastery. Eleanor's handwritten recipe book, its pages softened and stained with time, was their Bible. They finally had enough. They found the perfect building, a beautiful old brick corner spot in a neighborhood on the rise. They put in an offer, and then the diagnosis came. A cruel, swift illness that devoured their savings, their time, their future. The money for the restaurant became money for doctors, for hospitals, for treatments that bought them a few more precious months but couldn't buy them a miracle. When Eleanor passed, the dream died with her. Samuel was left with her recipe book, an ache in his soul that never subsided, and a profound understanding of how fragile things were. That's when he became the ghost. He couldn't build his own dream, so he became the silent architect of saving the dreams of others, all while remaining invisible himself. He took the pain and grief and forged it into a scalpel of pure, dispassionate competence. The money he made was meaningless. It was just a number, a way of keeping score against a world that had taken everything from him. He lived on almost nothing. The small brick house, the simple car, the quiet life, it was a shield. A way to hide from a world he no longer felt a part of. On his nightstand, next to a photo of Eleanor, sat her recipe book. He never opened it. He just rested his hand on its worn cover every night before he went to sleep. A silent promise. A constant reminder. The stage for Samuel's humiliation was a monument to manufactured hype. L'Étoile Filante was the creation of Antoine Dubois, a celebrity chef who was more celebrity than chef. Dubois had built a global brand on the back of a single, decade-old cookbook and a television personality that was equal parts charm and manufactured tyranny. He was famous for being famous. The restaurant itself was his crown jewel, a place so exclusive it was spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. The truth was, L'Étoile Filante was a shimmering, beautiful fraud. It was a house of cards built on debt and sustained by a cruel, calculated marketing strategy. The food was uninspired, and the recipes unchanged in years, the execution sloppy. The kitchen was a place of fear, not creativity, but the prices were astronomical, justified by an illusion of scarcity. Reservations were a myth. You didn't book a table, you were invited. You had to be a celebrity, a tech billionaire, a fashion icon, or you had to know someone. This performance of exclusivity was the restaurant's only remaining asset, and the master of ceremonies for this performance was Julian Croft. Julian was 24 years old, an aspiring influencer whose entire online identity was built around the concept of gatekeeping. His TikTok and Instagram were filled with slickly edited videos of him, shot by accomplices, politely but firmly turning people away from clubs, galleries, and most of all, from l'étoile filante. He would critique their clothes, their posture, their very essence, all with a serene, condescending smile. "The aesthetic isn't quite aligned with the establishment's vision tonight," he would murmur, his voice a smooth balm of poison. This curated cruelty was his brand, and Antoine Dubois loved it. Every viral video of a dejected couple being turned away from the golden doors of l'étoile filante was free advertising. It made the oligarchs and movie stars inside feel even more special, more chosen. Julian was not just a waiter, he was the guardian of the brand, the bouncer at the gates of heaven. He was rewarded handsomely for his televised snobbery, a fact that only inflated his already cancerous ego. He believed he was a connoisseur of taste, a protector of culture. In reality, he was just a bully with a good tailor, a pawn in a desperate game to keep a failing business afloat. The restaurant was weeks from defaulting on its loans. The whole glittering empire was about to crumble into dust. The 5th anniversary of Eleanor's death was also her birthday. For Samuel, the day was always a quiet ordeal of memory. But this year was different. His daughter, Maya, insisted they do something. Not to mourn, but to celebrate. To remember the joy, not just the loss. "She wouldn't want us moping around, Dad," she had said, her voice gentle. "She'd want us to eat somewhere beautiful." And there was only one place Samuel wanted to go. The building that housed l'étoile filante was the same building he and Eleanor had tried to buy all those years ago. The corner spot, their dream location. He had driven past it 1,000 times over the years. A self-inflicted wound, watching it change hands, watching it become this gaudy temple of excess. He had never been inside. The pain was too great. But now he felt a pull. He needed to see it. He needed to sit in that space, in the room where Eleanor's was supposed to be, and share a meal with his family. It wasn't about the food. It wasn't about the hype. It was a pilgrimage, a quiet act of remembrance. Getting the reservation was trivial for a man with his resources. He didn't call the restaurant. He called a number in Geneva, a discreet concierge service he used for his Ghost of Augustus work. The service catered exclusively to the world's wealthiest and most private individuals. He asked for a table for 4 at l'étoile filante on the evening of October 12th. He gave the name S. Washington. There was no hesitation. No talk of a waiting list. The reservation was confirmed within minutes. He wasn't seeking conflict. He wasn't planning a confrontation. He was just a grieving husband trying to honor his wife's memory in the only way that felt right. He put on his best suit, a simple navy wool that was 10 years old but impeccably maintained. He picked up his wife, his daughter, and his grandson. He just wanted a quiet dinner. He just wanted to sit at a table in a building full of ghosts and feel close to his wife for one night. The first sign of trouble was the hostess, a young woman with a frantic look in her eyes, scrolling through an iPad with a trembling finger. "Washington, I'm so sorry. I don't see anything under that name." Maya stepped forward, polite but firm. "I believe it might be under S. Washington. My father made the reservation." The hostess scrolled again. "No, I'm sorry. We are fully committed tonight, and for the next 6 months, in fact." Her apology was a brittle, rehearsed line. That's when Julian appeared, materializing at the hostess stand like a shark sensing blood in the water. He gave the hostess a look that was both a dismissal and a reprimand. "I'll handle this, Chloe." He turned to Samuel and his family, and his eyes performed a slow, insulting scan. He took in Samuel's simple suit, Maya's department store dress, Eleanor's classic but understated jewelry. He saw not people, but a category, a mistake. "Good evening," he began, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "Is there a problem?" "We have a reservation," Samuel said, his voice even and low. "I'm sure you believe you do," Julian replied, a small cruel smile playing on his lips. He tapped theatrically at the iPad. "But I can assure you there has been an error, perhaps on your part. Are you certain you have the right address?" The foyer was small, and the exchange was becoming a public spectacle. Diners at the closest tables paused their conversations, forks hovering midair. The air grew thick with the intoxicating drama of public humiliation. Someone near the bar, a man in a garish designer jacket, discreetly raised his phone. The lens pointed directly at Samuel's family. "We are at the right address," Maya said, her voice tight with anger. "This is l'Étoile Filante. My father made a reservation for 4 at 7:30. Julian let out a small, pitying sigh. "As I said, we are fully committed. It seems there's been a misunderstanding." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was intentionally loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is a very particular kind of establishment. The clientele is curated. Perhaps the bistro down the street would be more suitable for your party." The insult landed like a physical blow. The bistro! The cheaper, lesser place for the cheaper, lesser people. Leo, Samuel's grandson, flushed a deep, painful red. He looked at his grandfather, his eyes pleading. "Let's just go. Let's get out of here." Samuel remained preternaturally calm. He simply looked at Julian. "There is no misunderstanding. We have a reservation." It was this quiet insistence, this refusal to be dismissed, that sealed their fate. Julian's performance needed a climax. His audience was watching, waiting for the final act of rejection. He straightened his tie, puffed out his chest, and delivered the line he had used in a dozen viral videos. The line that brought the story to its beginning. "I'm sorry, sir, but I think you and your family are in the wrong place." He made the small final gesture toward the door. The show was over. The unwanted had been vanquished. The room held its breath, waiting for them to complete their walk of shame. Maya grabbed her father's arm. Her face was a mask of fury and hurt. "Dad, let's go," she whispered fiercely. "Please, this isn't worth it. He's not worth it." Her voice was shaking. "Let's just leave." Samuel looked at her, then at his grandson, who was now staring intently at a scuff on his own shoe, as if it contained all the world's mysteries. He saw the shame radiating from the boy, a toxic cloud of it. He saw the reflection of 100 other slights, 1,000 other moments where they were told, subtly or overtly, that they didn't belong. He saw the legacy of it being passed down to another generation, right here in this gaudy, soulless room. He turned. His family followed, a silent, defeated procession. He reached the heavy, ornate brass door. His hand closed around the cold, smooth handle. The room behind him collectively exhaled, a soft hiss of satisfied relief. The show had concluded as expected. The interlopers were gone. This was the moment. Not the confrontation that had just passed. Not the reveal that was to come. This. The hand on the cold brass. The weight of the door. The choice. The choice to accept a world that tells you where you belong, or the choice to remind that world who built it. It was the choice to absorb the humiliation, to carry it home and let it curdle into resentment, or to stand up, not with anger, but with the unshakable authority of truth. It was a choice he had been making his entire life, in quiet kitchens and lonely boardrooms, but this time his family was watching. His grandson was watching. and in the polished brass of the handle he could almost see Eleanor's reflection, her eyes asking him a single, silent question. "What will you do?" His fingers uncurled from the handle. He let his hand drop to his side. He turned around. The movement was so small, so quiet, it was almost imperceptible. But in the charged silence of the room, it was a thunderclap. Julian, who had already turned back to the hostess stand to share a triumphant smirk, froze. The diners, who had been resuming their conversations, fell silent again. Every eye in L'Étoile Filante was on the old black man in the simple navy suit who was supposed to be gone. Samuel did not say a word. He walked back across the marble floor, his footsteps the only sound in the cavernous space. He walked past the tables of astonished patrons. He walked right up to the maitre d's podium where Julian stood, his smugness rapidly evaporating, replaced by a flicker of confusion and then annoyance. The man with the phone filming the scene zoomed in, his hand shaking slightly. This was not in the script. Samuel reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. The gesture was slow, deliberate. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He wasn't reaching for a wallet. He was reaching for a reckoning. He withdrew a single small card. It was matte black, the cardstock thick and heavy. He placed it on the polished wood of the podium with a soft, definitive click. Julian stared at the card as if it were a scorpion. He looked from the card to Samuel's impassive face, then back again. Hesitantly, he picked it up. His brow furrowed in confusion. There was no logo, no address, just 4 words, printed in a clean, stark white font. L'Étoile Filante, LLC, and below that a name. Samuel Washington, sole proprietor. Time seemed to stop. Julian read the words once, twice, a third time. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed mask of disbelief. He looked up at Samuel, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. The carefully constructed world of Julian Croft, the arbiter of cool, the gatekeeper of exclusivity, had just been obliterated by a piece of paper the size of his thumb. Samuel finally spoke. His voice was the same as before, quiet, low, unhurried, but now it carried the immense, crushing weight of ownership. "My reservation," he said, "is for the owner's table. It is a permanent reservation, now. If you would please have our coats taken, my family and I would like to be seated." From the back of the restaurant, a door swung open with a crash. Antoine Dubois, the celebrity chef himself, stormed into the dining room. He was a large man with a florid face and a wild mane of graying hair, dressed in his chef's whites, a smudge of sauce artfully placed on his cheek for the cameras that weren't there. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed, his voice accustomed to echoing through terrified kitchens. "Julian, why are these people still here? I told you to handle it." Julian could only stammer, holding out the black card like a talisman that had failed to ward off evil. "Sir, this man, he—" Before Dubois could unleash his televised fury, the front door opened again. A man in a razor-sharp, brutally expensive suit stepped inside, followed by 2 other men who looked like they were carved from granite. The man in the lead held a leather briefcase. He surveyed the scene with the cool, detached air of a man who held all the cards. He walked directly to the podium, his eyes locking on Antoine Dubois. "Mr. Dubois," the man said, his voice crisp and devoid of emotion, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding." He gestured with his chin toward Samuel. "This is Mr. Washington. As of 9 o'clock this morning, he is the new owner of this establishment and all its assets. The sale of the parent company, Dubois Hospitality Group, was finalized after your final default notice expired at midnight last night." A collective gasp swept through the room. The patrons, bankers, real estate moguls, investors, understood the language of defaults and asset sales. This wasn't just a social faux pas. This was a corporate execution. The man in the suit, a partner from the city's most ruthless restructuring firm, opened his briefcase on the podium and produced a thick sheaf of documents. He spoke loudly, clearly, for the benefit of the entire room. L'Étoile Filante, along with all other properties held by your group, was insolvent. The bank has exercised its right to sell the debt to a third party to avoid catastrophic bankruptcy proceedings. That third party is a private hospitality fund. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. A fund that is wholly and solely owned by Mr. Samuel Washington. A woman at a nearby table, a famous food critic, whispered a name that rippled through the room like a shockwave. "My God," she breathed. "It's him. It's the ghost of Augustus." The whisper became a murmur, then a cascade of stunned recognition. These people, these titans of industry and culture, had all heard the stories. The mythical fixer who saved restaurants with a whisper and a notepad, they thought he was a myth, a boogeyman invented by consultants. And here he was, standing in a simple navy suit, holding his wife's hand, looking not triumphant, but tired. They weren't just watching a man get revenge. They were watching a living god of their world reveal himself. And they had been cheering for the flies buzzing around his head. The downfall was swift and mercilessly efficient. The video from the man's phone was already rocketing across the internet, captioned, "Racist waiter at L'Étoile Filante tells new owner he's in the wrong place." The hashtags were multiplying by the second. Hashtag Étoile exposed. Hashtag the wrong place. Hashtag ghost of Augustus. Antoine Dubois' empire, already a hollowed-out shell, imploded in the space of a single tweet. The man in the suit slid another document across the podium. It was a notice of his immediate termination and a restraining order preventing him from setting foot on the property. Dubois stared at it, his face crumbling from theatrical rage into pathetic, genuine despair. His two granite-faced associates gently but firmly escorted him. Not through the dining room he had commanded for a decade, but out the back, past the steaming dumpsters and grease traps. There was no grand exit. Just the quiet, pathetic end of a fraud. Julian, the architect of the evening's cruelty, stood frozen in place. Samuel finally turned his attention to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lecture him. He looked at the young man, at the cheap ambition and casual cruelty in his eyes, and he felt a profound sense of pity. "Your services," Samuel said, his voice flat, "are no longer required." Julian began to babble, to apologize, to plead, but Samuel had already turned away. He was looking at his family. Maya was crying, but this time the tears were of shock and overwhelming relief. Leo was staring at his grandfather, his eyes wide with an emotion so powerful it seemed to vibrate in the air. Awe. Julian, utterly broken, shuffled out the front door, his influencer career and his sense of self-worth destroyed before he even reached the curb. He was just a boy in an expensive haircut, suddenly realizing he had never mattered at all. The weeks that followed were a blur of transformation. 3 weeks after that night, a simple sign appeared on the doors of the now shuttered L'Étoile Filante, closed for renovation, under new management. 2 months later, the guts of the restaurant were gone. The gaudy gold leaf, the ostentatious chandeliers, the blood-red velvet, all of it was torn out, hauled away in dumpsters. Samuel was there every single day, not in a suit, but in work boots and a dusty flannel shirt. He wasn't just supervising, he was working. He consulted with the architects, he showed the plumbers where the new lines should go, he talked to the painters about the exact shade of warm cream he wanted for the walls. He was not just renovating a restaurant, he was performing an exorcism. He was casting out the ghost of Antoine Dubois and making room for the spirit of his wife. 6 months later, a new sign was hung above the door. It wasn't a grand, electrified marquee. It was a simple, elegant wooden sign, carved with a beautiful, flowing script. It said, "Eleanor's." This wasn't an act of revenge funded by a windfall. This was the culmination of a life's work. Samuel had used his own money, the quiet fortune he had amassed as the ghost, to buy the building he had lost 30 years prior. The purchase wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. His firm had been tracking Dubois Hospitality's decline for over a year, waiting for the precise moment of collapse. He hadn't come to the restaurant that night for a fight. He had come to dine in his new property for the first time. The confrontation was an unexpected, ugly bonus. On the day Eleanor's opened, he also announced the formation of the Eleanor Washington Culinary Grant, a fully funded scholarship and mentorship program for underprivileged youth in the city who dreamed of a life in the kitchen. The restaurant itself would fund it, with 20% of its net profits dedicated to the grant in perpetuity. The first class of 10 students was already selected. In the photos, Samuel is seen in a clean chef's coat, patiently showing a young girl, no older than he was when he started, how to properly hold a knife. His smile is genuine. It reaches his eyes. A year passes. It is a cool autumn evening, almost to the day of that night. Eleanor's is alive. The room is filled with the warm, low hum of happy conversation, the clinking of wine glasses, the scent of roasting chicken and fresh bread. It is beautiful. The walls are that perfect shade of cream, adorned with simple, elegant black and white photographs of the city's old neighborhoods. The tables are not too close together. The flowers are fresh. It is not exclusive. It is full, booked weeks in advance, not because of hype, but because the food is magnificent and the welcome is genuine. The tables are filled with a tapestry of the city. Young couples on first dates, families celebrating birthdays, old friends laughing. Samuel Washington is not in the kitchen. He is standing at the front by a simple wooden host stand in the exact spot where Julian once stood. He wears a clean white apron over a simple dark suit. He is greeting every guest himself, his handshake firm, his smile warm and real. A young couple, barely out of their teens, peer through the large front window. They look at the menu posted outside, their faces falling as they see the prices. They are clearly in love, and clearly don't have much money. They hesitate, then begin to turn away, a familiar look of disappointment on their faces. They believe they are in the wrong place. Samuel sees them. He opens the door and steps out into the cool night air. He approaches them gently, so as not to startle them. "Good evening," he says, his voice soft. The couple looks up, embarrassed, ready to apologize for loitering. "Don't worry about that," Samuel says, nodding toward the menu they were just studying. "Tonight, you're my guests. We have a beautiful table for two by the window." The young man starts to protest, to say they couldn't possibly. Samuel just smiles, a wide, radiant smile that seems to light up the whole street. He places a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Welcome," he says. "You're in exactly the right place." He leads them inside, seating them at the best table in the house. A table with a perfect view of the entire, beautiful, living dream. Have you ever been made to feel small? Have you ever been told, with a look, with a word, with a gesture toward a door, that you don't belong? Have you ever had your worth measured by the cost of your shoes or the brand of your suit? We live in a world that screams for our attention, a world of loud voices, bright lights, and carefully curated performances of success. We celebrate the loudest, the flashiest, the most outrageous. We give our views and our likes to the bullies and the gatekeepers, mistaking their arrogance for authority. But that is not where true worth lies. True worth is quiet. True power doesn't need to scream its own name. It's built in the silent hours before dawn. It's forged in discipline, in the relentless pursuit of mastery for its own sake. It's found in the promises we keep to ourselves and to the ones we've lost. It is the quiet dignity of a man like Samuel Washington, who turned grief into a craft, and a craft into a quiet empire, not of money, but of competence. The loudest voices, like those of Antoine Dubois and Julian Croft, are almost always the emptiest. They are echoes in a hollow drum. They build their kingdoms on sand, on the perception of others, and a single wave of truth can wash it all away. Look around you tomorrow, when you're on the bus, in the office, at the grocery store. Look at the janitor mopping the floors, the librarian stamping books, the quiet old man nursing a coffee in the corner. How many legends are you walking past every single day? What unseen expertise, what untold story of resilience, what profound well of love and loss is hidden behind their ordinary eyes? We are surrounded by ghosts of Augustus, silent masters of their own small universes. Their power isn't in their visibility, it's in their impact. They are the ones who build the world, who fix it when it's broken, who hold it together with the invisible glue of their integrity. The world will tell you where you belong. It will try to put you in a box, to label you, to dismiss you. The question is, will you let it, or will you, in your own quiet way, with your own hidden mastery, remind the world that you are the one who owns the room? Dignity is not something that can be given to you by a waiter in a fancy restaurant. It is something you earn in the dark and carry with you into the light. If this story reminded you of the power of quiet strength, share it. Let it be a signal boost for all the silent masters, for the humble and the overlooked. Comment below with a time you either misjudged someone or were misjudged yourself. Let's create a space where we recognize the worth that doesn't scream for attention. And please subscribe for more stories of the hidden heroes who walk among us, proving every day that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Hashtag the right place. Hashtag quiet power. Hashtag dignity. Wins. Hashtag underdog. Story. Hashtag legacy.